Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I have a very special guest. Karen is on to talk about a book that we both read, which is called Wanting. Do you have your book, Karen?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you do. You're so prepared. Okay. So maybe as a little bit of background, well, I don't know. I feel like you might know more, but our mutual friend or friend of a friend, Claire, wrote this book and it came out this year. And it is about a couple of friends who live in China. So I feel like part of the book takes place in China, part of the book takes place, I guess most of it takes place in China with flashbacks to the US. But Karen and I both read it. So on this episode or call or whatever we're doing, on this chat, we're just going to talk about it. And I have not talked to Karen about it at all, so I don't really know what she thinks. And maybe I'll start off with what did you think of this book? Okay,
Well, I
perfect.
guess, one
Why
thing
did you
is
want, yeah,
one thing
go.
is I'm Chinese
Oh,
and
yeah, that's true.
you're half Chinese. And so I
Perfect.
do I do think it's like it's a fun book to read. Like there's some Chinese in there and I've
Yeah,
I mean, I was born in the US and I've never lived in China, so I've only visited there and I haven't visited there. I haven't spent that much time there. So I
yeah.
didn't connect too much with like the place stuff, but definitely just like family dynamics and language and stuff.
Mm,
That part of it was fun to read for me.
yeah,
I mean, overall, I liked the book a lot. I like wanted, I was pretty like gripped by it, especially at the end. I read
yeah,
the last half like in a day, probably. Uh,
yeah.
and I feel like it's like juicy. It's good. It's a good read like when you're on vacation, I feel like, and you want to like get really into something. And I think the characters are all really compelling. So what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like I didn't. So that I feel like is part of what I did really like about the book, which is I've read a lot of what I would maybe call like identity memoir or like novels by Asian Americans. And a lot of them are good. A lot of them like really involve like that family dynamic or cultural dynamic. And so I was kind of expecting that with this. So I was surprised that it was like a thriller a little bit. And there was like, you know, I mean, there was a lot of that reflection stuff as well. And I think obviously they go hand in hand, and she was like trying to do both, but I appreciated that there was like a real plot.
Yeah.
There's like, and I think we can just talk about the plot. It,
Yeah, no,
uh,
spoilers are okay.
yeah, I think spoilers are fine.
Is this a
I
spoiler
mean,
free
I'm pretty
zone?
sure the audience that will watch this is like Ginny
Should
and
we
Claire, so
edit?
they
Should we
already know
edit
what's gonna
spoiler
happen.
free? Spoiler. Do you need a spoiler alert, maybe?
Well, okay, I'll just say, okay, so can you help me summarize it a little bit? And then I'll tell people that after this point, it's going to be full of spoilers. But I'm kind of struggling to summarize it. So basically, we have the point of view of Lian,
Hmm.
and basically her friend, Wenyu, went to the US. So they went to like school together
We
and
went to school
maybe, yeah,
together, and Leanne always like she is, I think, kind of a rule follower, a really good
yeah,
student, and in particular, she's really good at English, and so she has this dream to go to America.
yeah,
On the other hand, she became really close friends, kind of, coincidentally in a way, like had this sort of opposites attract like relationship with this friend Wenyu, where they became best friends, but Wenyu has always been a little bit more of like a rabble rouser. And so when like basically well, we learn more about what happened later in the book. So Wenyu ends up being the person who like makes it to America,
yeah,
and Lian does not make it to America. She goes to college in Beijing and she gets a nice job, and she has kind of like a successful life now. She has this boyfriend that she's had for a long time. They're probably going to get married. But she never like achieved this dream of going to America. And when you went to America, and they basically kind of lost touch after that, but then when you
yeah,
became kind of a famous influencer in America, talking about kind of like I guess she got her start kind of talking about how she was homesick for China, but she's
yeah,
like a general. Um, influencer, and Lian has kind of been like keeping track of her, through that lens. And then wenyu returns to China, and that's what the book is about.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like you hit some of the key points, which is I feel like the book is really about like I don't know, when you're like best friends with someone when you're younger, but then you like grow apart and you're not really sure like why you grew apart, but then it's so obvious that like Lian like is still, I wouldn't say obsessed, but just like still obviously really cares and like is tracking what Wenyu does. And so Wenyu is getting married to this white guy that she met while living in the US and is coming back to China because she wants to, I guess, throw like some sort of engagement party and also build their summer home in this suburb, like this rich suburb in Beijing. And then, so most of the book is about that and just like how they kind of reconnect. Um, but then there's also another point of view from the designer, architect, construction person who builds the summer house. And he also did his PhD in the US. So I feel like we have like two different stories of like Chinese people that went to the US and then came back. Um, so I feel like there's a lot in the plot that will keep your attention, and then I will not, then we can like spoil more plot points at the end of the call.
Right.
Or the whole thing can just be full of spoilers. I don't really know. Yeah. Um, Okay, so I think I also liked it. I think one thing that I find kind of annoying is that because I did live in China for a little bit, I kind of was like too over focused on like, did Claire do a good job of like depicting Chinese people in China today, which I don't actually think matters that much. Like the book is really good, the characters are strong, and I like the themes that she's talking about. But I kind of was like to be clear, I feel like she did a good job. Like obviously she like talked about WeChat, talked about like the apps that they use, like even referenced like I feel like she went on research trips and like she referenced specific places and most of the places I like recognized. But I did find myself like spending a lot of time being like, if my Chinese friends read this, would they be able to tell it was written by an American? And the answer is like 100%, 1,000% yes. Like it's still very much, I feel, like written by a Chinese American, which I don't think is like a bad thing. But I wonder like what you think like Claire was trying to do with like her use of like Chinese and English and like trying to blend those two worlds.
Yeah, well, so I also went to see Claire give a book talk in Baltimore about this
Perfect.
book. And I think one of the questions at the end, which was fun, and I mean, it's like, I feel like it speaks to me how hard it would be to like write a book like this. Like it's always hard to write a book that's like not exactly your perspective, right?
Yeah,
So like her actual perspective is as a Chinese American, and
exactly.
not someone who's lived in China their like entire life. Like I think she's lived in China, or she lived in the US at least for high school, middle, etc. And like she did talk about like how like if it gets translated or maybe when it gets translated into Chinese, like all of her family back home is like gonna be able to read it, and
Ooh,
it will actually like she is like kind of like nervous or like interested in like what they're gonna
yeah.
think about it. Yeah, I think we probably can't take it as like a 100%, like we shouldn't take it as a documentary of like China in this moment, and more just kind of like trying to tease out these like themes. Like I loved the movie Past Lives that came out
Mhm.
last year, because I felt like it was the first time that I had seen this thing depicted of like these two people are like in love in Korea, and then she goes to the US, and like
Mm,
he's so cool like in Korea,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And like then I can't really remember, but and then she goes to the US, and then
Mhm.
he comes to visit,
Yeah.
and he's like kind of lame. That was my
Yeah.
takeaway. You know
Yeah,
what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
But he's just lame because he's Korean and he's not American and he doesn't know what
Yeah.
is going on or whatever. Anyway, I think that is like something that I was like, I've never seen that depicted. Like, I've never
Mhm.
seen that sort of change in like context, total, like in the kind of like, immigrant story sort of thing depicted in that way, and how it like can just change someone from like, you know,
Yeah.
feeling really cool to feeling really uncool, I guess,
Oh,
like,
that's so
which I
interesting.
actually think was like so I was like that just feels so like real, Um,
Yeah.
and so I feel like that was the thing I was like most excited about in this book is just America seems so cool, kind of
Yeah.
always to people, and like I don't know, then suddenly when you're like in China, you just become more insecure that you're like not in America. And it's like you really don't know, and like also nobody's changed. Like, well, I
Yeah.
think part of it is like they're both imagining that like the other one has like changed so much or something and it's so different, and then it's like they've both actually been longing for each other. And it's like nothing's actually changed, but like when someone lives somewhere else, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, that makes
Some
me think of a lot
perception,
of
I
things.
think.
Yeah. So I feel like that's so interesting what you're saying about past lives because I feel like that's something that happens a lot in the book, but not necessarily only in the cool and uncool spectrum, but just like, because I also feel that living overseas, I've experienced it too, which is like you feel a different sense of self based on like, I mean, we all feel this, like when we go to our hometown after being in college, or like as an adult when you go to your hometown. Like it's so weird, you like revert to your old self. But I think what Claire did that was cool, which is what I think you're saying, is like examine it through the lens of this relationship and like this friendship. And like because of the geographic distance, there was like so much built up in each of their heads. Well, we only really get Lynn's perspective though, right? I'm always curious for like the other perspective because I do actually relate more to Wenyu, not because I'm a rebel, but because like she's the one that left. Like I
Right,
don't really relate to the one that like stayed behind, but
right,
I always sometimes like think about like what do people think, like the ones that like stayed behind. But anyway, yeah. And so I feel like when Wenyu comes back to Beijing, she like reverts to a previous self. But then
right,
I'm like, it's not, and so even I feel like we can talk about they both have affairs or like flings. And so much that she even like gets together with her high school flame.
right,
But then I'm like, once you go back to the US, are you going to feel that way at all?
right,
And I don't think she will. And I think that's why she stays with her fiance because ultimately we do become like different versions of ourselves and we
right.
can't just like yeah, change based on where we are at any given point. But they both, I feel like, tried to like live in the past a little bit. Yeah. And then the other thing I feel like, I don't know if you were saying this, but I feel like a lot of books that talk about like immigrant identity or whatever are really focused on just the American experience. I don't know. I think it was cool that this took place in China
Yeah,
because there's so much you can say and so much going on when you talk about like diaspora versus like the country today. Like, I don't know, like Korean Americans versus Koreans, Chinese Americans versus Chinese. And like, it's cool, even if it wasn't perfect, I think it doesn't matter. Like, it's cool that the book actually has multiple characters along the spectrum of like Chinese to Chinese American.
I guess what I was trying to say is for me, fundamentally, like the book was not necessarily like had to be about like China and the US as
Yeah.
specific places and specific cultures. That felt secondary to me. First, it's like navigating this like distance when you've like when one person's left and one person stayed behind.
Yeah.
And but then I agree with you also that it made it a more interesting book to me that it was set in China, because I think it has the opposite thing um, to past lives, which I also thought was
Mhm.
interesting. So maybe they're both
Yeah.
maybe everything is interesting, but it's like I don't know. I'm like I am fascinated by just like we were talking about this last night, but just how much America is like held up in like the world's kind of like stand like the American dream has like this kind of like
Yeah.
world appeal, and so like going to America is always feels like some sort of like amazing success sort of thing. Whereas like maybe like if it was an American who like moved to China or something, it would feel more like an adventure, but not quite like I've like leveled up into like a new, like social
Yeah.
status. But like, yeah, America has this cosmopolitan sort of, I mean, maybe that's like America to Paris. I don't know. But like, there's, I think the hierarchy of like countries also
Hmm.
it has changes how this distance and these relationships
Oh,
feel, which I think
interesting.
is kind of, so I think that's one thing that's kind of cool about like setting it in
Mm.
China is I haven't had the experience of living in a country that doesn't feel like
It's the
the top,
dream.
you know,
Yeah.
really. And
Yeah. I kind of forgot the whole like Lian really studies English. It's like she and there's like a something that happens. This is kind of more of the like thriller sensation. Like sometimes we get some flashbacks and I'm like, okay, that's so juicy. I feel like that's like it's a little bit like a different genre. But yeah, I kind of because it's good that you mentioned that like that was really like to Lian, like going to America was the dream. And like when you got it and it wasn't even her dream. So I do feel like Claire is trying to say something about how like this American dream is not like all it's chalked up to be, which is like very obvious now, I feel, or like is said by a lot of people. But I'm curious what you think because I actually really like Chen's story. I don't know if I'm just like more old school. I feel like I had a lot of weird, complicated feelings about Lian and Wenyu, and I was just kind of like too fixated on would this really happen to like fully
interesting.
appreciate it as much as maybe you could have. But for Chen, I feel like, yeah, I feel like I've heard that story so like I know so many people that basically everyone I know has done their PhD in the US and then like gone back to
Mm.
China or then like
Mhm.
gone back to, but none of them are so salty about it. So basically, I feel like Chen had a really bad experience. Was he doing an econ PhD? I forget where. But this
Okay.
even like
He
your
was
parents, I
doing a
feel like
math
every
PhD at
yes,
University of Illinois
exactly.
Urbana-Champaign, and
That's what I'm
his wife
saying.
was doing an econ PhD, to be clear.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like even you and your parents, like everyone I know, like,
Yeah,
so
totally.
that I don't know, I just maybe felt like a little bit more familiarity with that storyline.
Yes,
And
it's
I
more common to go to the US and become a PhD student than it is to become an influencer. Like
yeah,
the
but
modal experience.
I feel like she was like a little bit heavy-handed, like basically like he had to plagiarize to pass his dissertation. He couldn't find a job, and so then he had to work at a Chinese restaurant. And like I'm sure that
That's true.
happens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm sure that happens, but I don't, I mean, I'm in a
Right.
bubble, but like I feel like for a lot of people, the American dream did turn out pretty nice.
True.
But
Right.
it's cool that she also showed that it was more complex for him. I don't
Right.
know. What did you think about the second perspective of Chen,
Yeah,
like his
I feel
story?
like I wasn't that into it when I started reading
Yeah,
it. I was like, I gotta get back to Lian and when you
the
guys,
girls.
I
Yeah,
want to know what's going on with their boy
yeah,
and stuff. But then when Chen's story got pretty juicy, obviously I got really into it. I'm here for the drama, number one.
yeah.
Um, but I did really like, I agree with you that like probably like him having to work at a Chinese restaurant and not being able to find a job, like feels maybe like on the pretty far end of the spectrum for a math PhD. Um, I mean, I did a PhD, my parents did a PhD. I think the parts of it that felt interesting to me are the reason that that happens to him is kind of because he doesn't commit to like becoming Americanized and to his English. And like that
That's such
is
a good point.
it's pretty that's like that is a spicy take, but I don't, and this is like connected to my own feelings about academia. It's not a crazy take. It's like a
Yeah,
spicy take that a lot of academics would hate to hear you say and would
yeah,
really argue against because they would be like, we're like the most meritocratic, like
yes,
it's all about your scholarship sort of things, like and like, all sorts of like extremely like socially awkward people
yeah,
in academia. So like
yeah.
it's probably not fair to fully say that like academia as a career is like, entirely about your kind of like social and assimilation skills
An ability to self-promote.
and ability to self-promote. But I do think that is part of it, and it's always in every job. And maybe that's what feels like the betrayal is like literally every job, everywhere. You gotta like be nice to people, ingratiate yourself, you know,
Yeah.
like like learn what they like and like it
Yeah.
too. And so like none of that is new, but like maybe for academics it feels like particularly just like devastating to have to do that instead
Yeah.
of like just doing your math, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
but I appreciate that Claire didn't make him like fully sympathetic because I don't even think that Chen was like faultless. I feel like he was like kind of lazy. Maybe lazy is not the right word, but I feel like he was principled when
yes,
he was being
when it didn't.
defensive.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not like I didn't find him to be like I hate how they're forcing me to assimilate. So on principle, I refuse to. I kind of feel like he put in a good effort. It didn't really like come to him naturally. And so then and I'm not saying this is wrong, like you shouldn't be this way. I feel like a lot of people are this way. But then like when it he got called out on it, he became so defensive and then it became like Robert Cheong, the guy that his wife had an affair with, who was also like already tenured or somehow was on his dissertation panel, a young professor, I guess. Like he was the embodiment of everything he hated because he spoke really good English, was like somehow this like idealized like portrayal of what he couldn't be. Almost like too much, I feel like, but yeah.
Yeah. And then I feel like Chen, fucks up a lot. Like and
Yeah.
then he's like literally pretending to have a job when he doesn't and not being honest
Yeah.
with his wife,
Yeah. And then when he
and
goes back to China, he gets caught up. I mean, this is super common. I think that's like pretty realistic. What he gets into is like all the real estate stuff is kind of sketchy. And like he gets into this line of work that is just has a lot of money in it. And but maybe they're not using like the best materials for this construction. But again, it's kind of just that's what I liked is he was just kind of like an everyman. He wasn't like I feel like I would be more annoyed if he was supposed to be this like
yeah.
principled. So I just feel like those kind of people don't exist. And
Yeah.
not to speak in really broad brushstrokes, they definitely don't really exist in like Chinese immigrant people. I feel like typically immigrants and like I don't know, they're just trying to like
For
survive or
practical. Yeah.
yeah, practical, like not
Yeah.
to generalize. So I just don't feel like if Claire had made him like super idealistic, I think that would have been a turn off. So
Right.
I feel like he just kind of like went where the water took him and it was not very good places in general. Yeah.
One thing I did think was interesting, and I wanted to like look this up later, was when they talk about like the suicide of the Chinese PhD student and how like everybody was like really, I don't know, I was just like curious if that was like a real story. Um,
Oh, the
but
Japanese. No, no, no. Was it the Japanese PhD?
it might have been.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
know. I just thought that was like an interesting piece where it felt very like it felt like it must be a real thing that happened in like
Yeah.
that particular era that like maybe got a lot of news, but like I do also find that part interesting, just like how we react to like stories in the media and like that part felt very realistic that like people would feel it so much deeper. Like there would be a lot
Mm,
of opinions about it, but like Chen has his own opinions about it because he like is feels very deeply connected to like the kind of Asian PhD
yeah.
experience. Um,
Yeah, I think Claire took like a while to write this book. I don't know if it's 10 years or 5 years, but definitely many years. And I'm just like, such a proponent of that. I feel like people are writing books way too fast, especially a lot of the popular authors now, like write a book every 1 to 2 years. And like some people can do it, like I think Sally Rooney, fine, like you can do it. But like other people, it's like you need some time, not just for the ideas to cook, but like to do research. And so I do trust that Claire did like a lot of
yeah.
research and thinking because like, she spent so long on the book. But I feel like I'm just a lot more familiar. So like in China, that's very common for like the stress of the school system to result in suicide, but I've never heard of like it being that big a thing among like American PhDs, but I just don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's probably not an epidemic, but it is like
Yeah.
if it is a part of, kind of like the Chinese cult, like if it is a thing that has happened in China, then it must also be a thing that happens for similar, like people who have, Chinese PhD students are facing some of those
Yeah.
same pressures,
Correct.
and culture
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I'm curious for your thoughts. I feel like one of the underlying themes is just like not being able to express yourself, which sometimes I get annoyed if it's done too much. Like I know a lot of Asians who can express themselves fine and like do not keep things inside. But having said that, of course, it is like more of a cultural tendency for this group of people. But I feel like it comes up a lot in the book. Like Lian can't express herself to Wenyu. Lian also can't express herself to her partner. Wenyu maybe is a little bit better. I feel like in Chen's story, he keeps a lot of stuff from his wife. One of the themes that I enjoyed from this book is just like what happens when you aren't like able to really like talk about things that make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, at the end, so basically, we'll spoil. Everything comes to a head because Chen's using faulty materials to construct this summer house for Wenyu and her fiance. Wenyu and Lian are both there late after a party with each of their like flings that are not their partners. And Wenyu tells her high school boyfriend that she's actually not going to leave her fiance for him. And then I feel like he gets upset and sets the house on fire, right?
I don't think he set the house on
He
fire.
does it. Oh, that's the scapegoat. Yeah, 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 correct. So
I think it just,
because of the faulty construction, the chandelier drops and starts the fire, and
yeah,
it hits him.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why the chandelier dropped. I think just because it was like, it had just, the house had just been built. And so, like, it just kind of fell. Like, it was just a freak accident.
Oh, and then it caught on fire because of the shitty materials
Yeah,
that he used.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for
I was
me, that was
probably
like,
like reading pretty, I was
yeah,
reading pretty quick at the end. I wanted to know what
yeah,
happened. Because then I
yeah.
also, like, one thing I meant to go back and reread because I was like, what happened to Freddy? We get no follow-up on Freddy.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, we could do like an
Run away?
analysis of each of the characters, but oh, I don't know what happened to Freddy. Freddy like runs away. I think we get like a brief mention of him later. Like
I don't think we do, dude.
he's a no, yeah,
Oh, yeah, we get
yeah, he
his
wins like
way,
a
but
yeah.
what happened to him in the fire? There's like
Oh,
no
I don't know.
mention of him
He
at
just
all.
like
Like,
dash,
yeah,
yeah. But we
no.
could like do this analysis of every character because Freddy also has like these high and mighty dreams of the US. But
Yeah.
then he also, it's so interesting. I think she does capture this really well, which is what you're describing, which is just like this default assumption that like going to the US is the pathway to success.
Yeah.
And it's just like not true anymore. I
Sure.
feel like in a lot of ways it's true. Like even in my own work and whatever, it's still the default. But Freddy, I think, represents because he was really obsessed with having like a Chinese superhero and like Mr. Chinaman or something like that, which is like which is something that like the Chinese government has tried to do, like create like a Chinese national hero. But like Freddy, I feel like even though he wanted to be more like I don't want to say pro-China, but like more like I don't know, like represent China, he still like wanted to move to New York.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
feel like every single character in this novel has like some type of like idealization of the
Complex.
US.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some complex about it. Yeah.
Totally. And I guess I'm curious, like, do you feel like that feels true to you, like living in Asia?
Yeah, that's where I feel.
In kind of the higher echelon
Yeah.
circles of Asia, I guess, is that there is always a like has lived in the US, hasn't lived in the US sort of divide or,
Yeah, I don't know
does
if
that
it's
feel
just
like a thing?
yeah. So that is a great question, and I think that's what I want to articulate is I don't know if it's just like the phase I'm in now, but that feels very American to me to
I think
assume that
that.
everyone
Mhm.
is
Yeah,
like
right.
that the only two things in this world are like the US and China. But having said that, I do think it's true. Like you cannot deny it. Like everyone in China learned English. Everyone in Singapore is learning has well, Singapore is English speaking nation, but I just think that, and this is just because her book is more of a thriller. I think she just like amped it up a little bit more. Like, and especially for China, I do think there is still a lot of like obsession around like going to the US and the US being like the key to success. And
And
it's,
I guess
yeah,
my question
it's,
is, I don't even know if this is not even really like, well, it kind of is captures the dynamic in the book. Is like, do you think that there is a hierarchy between people who have been and have lived there and people who have not?
Yeah, so that's undeniably the case for
Okay.
sure. And
Even
just
if
like,
it's like you're super successful in China, you've become successful, but you just
yeah,
did that without living in the US. Yeah.
yeah, I would say that that is undeniably the case. And I think Claire got that spot on. Like, even if you're, I mean, we're talking about people working and living in China. You're not even in the US.
Yeah,
Like, if
exactly.
you will just get hired, like, it's just like having a master's. Like, for sure you will be. And in Singapore too, if you've gone overseas, I feel like you will be treated a little bit different in the job market. But the only exception being like if you are a government official and then you have like the most power because
Hmm.
yeah, but a lot of Chinese government officials have studied in the US.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
In like Wisconsin and Illinois, like the Midwest, like it's so,
Right.
I think someone should write a paper about how like the Midwest has shaped Chinese leaders. Okay, anyway, but yeah, yeah. So yeah, the more I talk about it with
Well, I
you, I
will
do feel
say
like
on the
there's a lot
Midwest
of
theme,
nuance.
like I think one of the reasons I think a lot about like place-based social hierarchies is because
Yeah,
I think within the US, the Midwest
yeah,
is at the bottom, you know?
yeah.
And I've always like had a chip on my shoulder about it because it's like just because you grew
Karen's
up
from
in
the
New York
Midwest.
City doesn't make you cool. You know what I mean? Like that's just where you grew up. That's like that's just a biographical fact. Or you
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like it's just a random change. Like there's nothing that's like that's not an inherent personality characteristic.
yeah.
And so I think that's like also funny, right? That like it's like you're like China and the US have this hierarchy, but then if people like went to study in the US, they actually like were studying in the Midwest, which actually like has another hierarchy with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like fun.
But that's the funny thing is people don't really care if the school was good. I mean, within certain circles maybe, but like more generally, as long as they see like US on your resume, they don't really care where. You know, maybe it would have been too much and maybe like too heavy-handed, but I do think it would have been cool to have one character that was just like very confident in her Chinese-ness.
Yeah, right.
Because none of them
Yep.
are like, and I have met Chinese people like that who are, I
Hmm.
mean, I think the like adoration of the US and the West is pretty like default,
Hmm.
but I do know some who are just very like no interest at all. Like
Hmm.
could
Right.
not be bothered and like I have a great life.
Yep.
And maybe it's like out of the scope of this book, but I do feel like that would have been cool to
Yeah.
see as a character.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, for me now, I feel like, my parents have moved back and they love to
Yeah.
talk about how it's better, so there's like a whole like new thing developing, which I think is also an interesting dynamic to explore. Is like all the ways in which like China is a better place to live now, you
Well,
know?
so Karen, I feel like that's part of why I feel a little conflicted is I think actually now you're making me realize is it does feel a little out of date, which just happens when you spend 10 years writing a book, which is I think now there are so many returnees that have gone to China and there is a little bit maybe more of that like oh China is better. Like even on TikTok, people are like this is what they made us afraid of like and it's showing like Shenzhen and it's
Mhm.
beautiful.
Mhm.
So I do think that's just hard when you're writing a book. And like maybe that's where I was kind of like a little bit like iffy because I feel like I was like, is that what it's like now? But then of course it's like unreasonable to expect Claire to like have the most contemporary view of it. And I think it's really cool that we have this view because I think it's like pretty
And she's a
unique.
YouTube influencer, not a TikToker, right? So like
Yeah,
maybe
I
this is
know no
actually
one's
set like
yeah.
5 years ago, 10 years ago. I
I
don't know.
think it should just be set 5 years ago. Yeah, or
It
10
might
years
be.
ago.
You don't know.
Oh, it probably is. It probably is. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why I assumed it would be like yeah,
2025.
year of our Lord 2025. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Yeah.
The worst year for America in its history.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I feel like to wrap up, I'm curious if you have anything else you want to talk about. If you feel like Claire has like any like lesson or message for us. I feel like the message at the end. Well, so it's kind of cheeky, right? Because it's not really like everyone just gets what they deserve because I don't know, the high school boyfriend like makes a lot, he's in a coma for 5 months, but then he like makes a lot of money from like
Right.
writing this book about the rabbit trap which I thought maybe the rabbit trap. I don't know if you remember this story. We like also learned it in Chinese school. But
Oh my
basically
gosh.
the
Okay.
guy, yeah, the farmer where the rabbit runs into the tree and then he's like, "Great, we can eat rabbit." And so every day he waits out there for another rabbit to run into the tree and then
Yeah.
starves to death.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when like the moral of the story is like you should have learned that you should like build a rabbit trap.
That's so funny that you remember learning that in Chinese school. I mean, I
But
don't, but I don't
but am
remember
I
from
I
Chinese.
mean, I remember it once I read it, but am I just being dense or is that like related to the story? I'm kind of missing the connection between that fable and the rest of the book. So maybe there isn't one. I don't know, but yeah, so then he writes his own like very popular blog. So I feel like in terms of the fate of each of the characters, they kind of just continue on the path they were
I
on, except for
know.
Chen who gets a divorce. So
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I do think I would like to talk about the ending,
great.
you know? So first of all, were you surprised? I guess I was, they both choose their original boyfriends, right?
Yeah.
I think I wasn't surprised that when you chose her original boyfriend, I kind of thought that that was where that was going. I was kind of surprised that Lian chose her original boyfriend,
Yeah.
I guess, because then it felt to me a little bit like, I mean, I didn't, I didn't, there was nothing about their relationship that I like really felt connected to.
Yeah.
And like, Freddie and her like talking about movies like felt really fun,
Yeah.
Whereas like when used relationships with both boys seemed like potentially toxic in different ways, so I felt more indifferent. But yeah, so like I'm curious if you felt like surprised that they both chose those boyfriends on and they don't really talk. They stop really they don't
And then
the
wenyu.
reconnection
Yeah.
is kind of over after that.
Yeah.
And that kind of felt sad to me too. Like, is the ending sad?
Yeah.
Or
Ooh,
is
great question. Yeah. No, all of those are great questions. I don't really know that I have an answer, but I do like that I feel like it's realistic
yeah.
because there's something about that summer that felt like, lightning in a bottle or something. Like, and then the takeaway is kind of like, that's not realist. That's not who we actually are. Like, now let's return to our real lives. And I feel like a lot of speculative fiction or like more identity driven fiction is about like leaving societal expectation and like doing what's right for you as an
hmm
individual. And I kind of like that this instead was more just like, I just feel like it was more realistic that like, given
This
that
is
she's
an
making,
experience, but it doesn't have it's still an experience even if it doesn't change your like trajectory in a very dramatic
yeah,
way.
yeah. So I love that. And I also just love that it's like, if you've been making this decision for the last 10 years of your life, I just don't think that you're going to not continue to make that decision for the next 10 years of your life. So I just feel like it was more realistic. And I've been reading a bunch of books recently where it's like, I love the book for 95%, but then the last 5% is like the characters then like do something where
Totally
they're like,
different.
and yeah, and I'm just like, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah. hmm
Yeah,
Except them not choosing new boyfriends.
yeah.
But I feel that they could still be friends.
Oh, so on that part, yeah, I don't know. That's not my experience. I feel like if I connect with someone, I will then be friends with them. Maybe. I don't know. What do you think? I feel like, yeah, they could have still been friends. And I feel like it wasn't even just that they reverted to their old selves. I feel like they both pursued flings. I feel like they did learn. I don't know about Wenyu because we don't get her perspective. Wenyu maybe just stayed the same. But Lian definitely changed.
Right.
So then I get what you're saying. I feel like it's a little bit like if she went through this character growth, then why didn't anything really change for her in terms of how she treated Wenyu and how she treated.
I feel like I think this book is saying, friendship can be very complicated, which I think
Yeah.
really, always love as a
Yes.
theme. But in contrast to relationships, at least monogamous relationships that most people have, like you don't have to pick one and like you can always like friendships can evolve. I think they're better at evolving. And so I think it would have been nice for me because I just
Yeah, it's disappointing.
friends for the friendship to have evolved now that they did have like some openness between them
Yeah.
also where they like discussed like what went wrong and it's
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
That felt
Yeah, I totally agree because I also felt that that was probably the thing I remember the most and impacted me most from the book is the fact that Wenyu thinks that Lian abandoned her and Lian thinks that Wenyu was too good for her because I just so relate to that. I'm not like specifically that, but just like, miscommunication and then it like building up in your head. And I feel like that was really like well depicted. But now you're making me think like I don't even because like Lian has babies and just like lives this very like I don't know. I feel like maybe I'll need to reread the ending because I feel like Lian just is like totally back on the same
right.
track without having that much like self-reflection.
So I'm reading the last page because I couldn't really remember if they don't talk. And I guess they
Yeah.
do see each other, but it's like 10 years later or something with all of the children involved. And um, that she writes, Leanne liked to believe they could only see each other during these delayed, intense intervals because otherwise their collision would be too much. Either of them would stir up too many maybes in the other. Or perhaps it was just the logistics of life that kept them apart. So that's like,
Oh, but then she's like, it's the logistics of life. Okay, go ahead.
that's an explanation, you know? This like too many it's like they didn't, it's like they kind of didn't want to see each other because it's like, it's too intense, I guess. And, I think my frustration is, if anything, the lesson from this
Mm,
experience is like you guys get a lot from seeing each other and trying to figure it out in some way, or I wouldn't have been so upset if like they had then tried to talk for like 2 or 3 years after that and like tried to make it work and then it faded again, but like kind of like just to like have it totally disappear and just be like, ugh,
yeah.
it's too much. Feels like they weren't putting effort into their friendship, which I just feel like should have been the lesson that they learned.
Yeah. Oh, I love hearing about that from you because I feel like you're saying like, yeah, putting effort into the friendship and how the friendship could have like grown. But for me, I totally agree. But then I also feel like I wasn't sure if Claire was like, is she saying, there's like your real self and then like the self that society forces you into. And I feel like with Liane, it was very much like Jilatai, her boyfriend, was like the perfect boyfriend. The parents like each other, like whatever. And then if her whole book was meant to be about like, okay, you don't choose your real self, you choose the society self, I feel like it wasn't like made clear enough because there's just like that one line at the end. And I also feel like we don't get enough of Wenyu's perspective to know. I feel like Wenyu didn't like grow as much. I feel like Wenyu did all of her like personal growth in the US when she was like really struggling
Mm-hmm.
and like having such a hard time. Then I feel like she like got it together. I'm gonna marry this software engineer. I'm like double down. And like I feel like for Wenyu, it was like a conscious choice. Whereas like Lian, I feel like I still had some hope that maybe she would like pick something different.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but then it's always hard because it's like, is your real self the self that enjoys like, being a good daughter and having good relationships with your parents and being a good daughter-in-law also, like
Lian
that's a
really
totally
loved.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. That's a
She
totally
loved, like,
valid.
she made like pastries from scratch for her mom-in-law every year. Not, I mean, she loved that. That wasn't
Yeah,
like imposed on her. Yeah.
right, exactly. And then I think it's like that's really hard when you have someone who knows you very deeply from a different part in your life where that wasn't something where you wouldn't have been able to make pastries or whatever, and that is like the difficulty of these like long friendships is like they're, especially if like we're never going to spend as much time with our friends as we did like in high school or college, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so then, it's like they know that part of you the most
Yeah.
version of you. Now you're a new version of you.
Yeah.
You make those two sit with each other. But I
Yeah.
feel like you should try. You shouldn't just say, you know, it's too much to have these two things collide, like these two versions of myself collide.
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I feel like you just articulated it really well, but I feel like I didn't get that from the book. I feel like I maybe need another 15 pages that shows, like, we get a little bit, like, when Wenyu shows up to Lian's mother-in-law's birthday, it's kind of like the collision of like these two worlds. But I feel like maybe that's the only time it happens. I feel like
Mhm.
they needed maybe like one more
Oh, that's
fight
a
or
good
one
point.
more, yeah, where it was kind of like, why do you even like Jotai? Or like, why are you such a little
Right.
prissy this or that? But maybe I feel like that the ending, which you said, which I agree now, like went by pretty fast.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I needed a few more pages to like
Yeah.
see that tension. But now that I hear you say it, I'm like, yeah, correct. What else? I feel like we recommend this book. And if you thought our conversation was interesting, you should definitely check it out.
And
Um,
subscribe to this YouTube channel.
I mean,
Hit that
at this,
subscribe button right
yeah,
now.
I mean,
And
at this
leave
point,
us some likes too.
oh my God, so funny. Okay. Is there anything else you would like to say or ask, Karen?
No,
I think I'll just post this. I mean, I don't think it needs any editing, which is
got
fantastic.
none, no editing at all.
Well, thanks for coming on the channel,
Okay.
and I'll see you in the next video.